Hey Comm students, Dr. Sloan again, and this is part 2 of my video on preparing an APA style paper. So my last video really focused on taking a second to outline and then being an organized writer. So I talked about creating strong thesis, sentence, preview statements, and putting those things into the introduction and conclusion. In this video, what I'm going to focus on is settings in Word so that your Word document adheres to APA style. And then I'm going to show you some quick things on how to cite an APA style. So there are two things that you can do. You could just start writing your paper and then make all the APA style settings after you write your paper, or you can just make your settings what you need them to be when you start a blank Word document. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how to do both. So the first thing I'm going to do is open a new Word document. You could have a different version of Word. It's the same concept. You just open a Word document. And what I just did is Control A, so I'm telling the entire Word document to listen to me. Everything here is now going to be in Times New Roman 12-point font. And I'm going to tell it to be double-spaced. So right away, before I start typing anything, the font knows what it needs to be, the size is what it needs to be, and the spacing is what it needs to be double. So I can write my title, Messages in Fresh Off the Boat. I would write my name, and I would write my university. No other information is needed. So I don't need my name on there. I don't need the class number. I don't need the date. And you're going to center all of this text, and you're actually going to try to center it on the page. So you can kind of scroll down and you see it's somewhat centered on the page. A weird thing Word does is this is actually more than double space. So if I put my cursor here at the end and I said remove space after paragraph, you'll actually see that that's more than double space. It's an awful setting that Word does, and it does it everywhere. So what you can do is you can just, again, after you're done writing or as you go along, you can just highlight everything, which again, I just click Control A, and I can remove space after the paragraph, and that got rid of all that extra spacing. Another way to do that is, again, Control A, so everything is highlighted and everything will listen to me, and I go to Page Layout, and for whatever reason, Word documents automatic spacing is 8 points after, and that should be 0. So when I hit 0, enter, it all listens to me again, and there's no extra spaces. So that might be something you want to change after you finish your paper, and it'll remove all the extra spaces between headings and paragraphs and things like that. The next thing I'm going to do is quickly show you how to create a running head in APA style so you can visually see what you need to do. The first step is you're going to double click into your header. As soon as you're in your header, you absolutely need to click different first page first. If you don't do it in this order, then what you type will get wiped clean, so just do it in this order. So click different first page and then go ahead and insert your page number at the top of the page. So I'm right here. And then I'm going to type the word running head. The H in head is not capitalized. APA has a lot of weird things, so just learn how to do it correctly. And then I'm going to either write my full title in all caps or a shortened version of my title in all caps. A weird thing, again, that Word does is you saw that I formatted everything to be Times New Roman, but for some reason, Word does not recognize that should also be true in the header. So I'm going to hit Control A. I'm going to tell my heading to be Times New Roman, and it should be 12-point font. Then I'm going to put my mouse after the T, and I'm going to click Tab, Tab. And you'll notice that when I do that, my R is left aligned here within the 1-inch margin, and my page number is correct here on the right. So my cover page now is flawless. I'm going to put my cursor after my Y, and I'm going to click Insert Page Break. A lot of you guys are telling it manually to space, 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 space. And that's kind of a headache because if you make a change, then it changes all of the spacing everywhere. So instead, just tell Word document to go to a new blank page. One thing I should be doing, the first title, the first line of my content page is my title. And just so you know, in APA style, titles of newspapers and TV shows and films should be italicized. So make sure that you're consistent in that. So now we're on the first page of the content, and I have one more heading correction to do. So I've created a perfect running head on my first page, and now I need to complete my header throughout the rest of my document. So I'm going to double click again into the header. I click right here that I need to insert a page number at the top of the page, and here I'm just going to type in my shortened version of my title. I did a shortened version so that I knew everything would fit. And again, one more time, I need to tell Word to be in Times New Roman 12-point font. And then I can click out of my heading or header, and every header for the rest of the document will be correct, because once you've done the different first page, which is here, and you've told Word what you want page 2 to be, every page after that will look exactly like this. So for example, if right now I inserted a new blank page, now we're on page 3, it looks, the heading is exactly perfect. So just take the time to do it correctly and you'll be correct throughout. So this is kind of what things should look like if you started a blank Word document and you needed Word to adhere to APA style. I'll also show you kind of how to do the flip version. So in the last video, you saw me kind of creating a system for effective organized writing. So what I'm going to do now is tell all of this that I need it to be in, I can highlight manually or I can hit Control A again. And here I'm going to tell everything to be in Times New Roman. So you see the font automatically, you saw the font change here. It's going to now change to 12-point font. You saw that happen. Another thing that I want it to do is I want to remove all these extra spacings. So see how there are spaces between the paragraphs and the headings? I'm going to remove all the spacing, and then I'm going to tell it to be a double-spaced document. And so you saw all of those things happen correctly before your eyes. Now this is a perfect APA style Word document where the first title, the first line is the title, there's no extra spacing, everything's double spacing, and I can, because I'm not manually changing the spacing, I can insert new sentences or words anywhere, and the Word document just shifts along with my writing. So that's a huge thing. Several of you guys were kind of manually creating spacing, and that's a lot more work than just telling your Word document to be in double space setting. The next step is for your references. You actually want to tell Word again to go to a page break. And that's because, let's say I later wanted to add a few sentences here to my paper, then when I do that, this kind of continues. What you see here is the conclusion continues, and my references don't just show up here in the middle of the conclusion page. They still stay on their own page. For an APA style reference, you have the author's last name and their first initial. If they have a middle initial, you include that as well. For the title, you capitalize the first word of the title and the first word of the subtitle. And if there is a proper noun in the title, you would also leave that capitalized. What you need to do in APA style references is you actually have to include a hanging indent. So to create a hanging indent, you can do two things. You can just grab this mouse, just grab the last part, the bottom part, and shift it over 1/2 inch. And that creates a hanging indent. And what's neat is if you create it the first time on the first reference, then you can say, here's a new reference, and whatever you type, it'll automatically be a hanging indent as well. So you see how that automatically did that. So it's really helpful. Make sure that you list your authors in APA style. Another way, just in case Word doesn't listen to you or like you, is like what you're doing when you ship that. I'm sure Word likes you. Is you can do hanging indent by highlighting your reference. And again, you want to go to paragraph, and you're going to go to line spacing options, and you can click hanging and click OK, and you'll see how that created a hanging indent there as well. So there's a lot of ways, again, that Word will listen to you if you kind of learn how to do that. So the last thing I'm going to go over in this tutorial is how to cite in APA style. So one thing that several of you guys were doing is you would credit your source maybe once, but then you would share a ton of information from that source. Well, that's actually plagiarism, because you're not crediting that person every time you're sharing learned information. So you might have been sharing it in your own words, but you learn that content from the source. And so anytime you see me write in parentheses, cite source, you're sharing something that's not general knowledge, meaning you need to credit the author for that knowledge. So work really hard to credit the source over and over. I would rather see you guys oversighting than underciting, because oversighting is ethical and underciting is plagiarism. When you paraphrase a source, that's basically taking another author's words and putting them in, or taking another author's idea or information and writing it in your own words, but you'd still credit that person for the idea or for the knowledge. And when you have a paraphrase citation, that's author or authors and year. A direct quote includes quote marks, author, year, and the page number. If it's an online source and there's no pages, then you would include the paragraph number. So some examples would be, let's say this is an article, let's say, today I was reading an article, and Handley 2015 argues, your tone of voice isn't about what you say, but how you say it. It's about the impression your brand leaves on customers. So in this way, the author and year are always together. So author, next to author is always the year. And then you see that I started my quote here, I concluded my quote here, there's a space, and then I begin P period, and then the number, and then parentheses, and then the period goes at the end of the page, okay? Some of you guys were doing page, that's not APA style, and some of you guys were doing 2 Ps. You only do 2 Ps if you have a page range, okay? This is the exact same quotation, but instead of kind of creating a phrase with the author, I just did everything at the end of the sentence. You can do either, both are correct. So here I began the quote, your tone of voice isn't about what you say, but how you say it, end quote, author, year, page period, number, and end series. If there's several authors, then it could be Handley, Milner, and Sloan. So notice that when I'm writing about the author in parentheses, I use an ampersand. If I were doing it here, Handley, Milner, and Sloan. So you would use the word and in text, and you would use an ampersand if you're in parentheses. And then this is an example of how I have paraphrased this Handley quote. Tone of voice is important in business branding, so consider your company's tone. That's my words, but the idea of what I'm saying came from Handley 2005. So this is an example of a direct quote, an example of a direct quote, and an example of a paraphrase. If you need help with more examples of how to cite correctly in APA style, all of you guys in your, there's a folder on the course called Useful Comm Docs, and in it is an APA tip sheet, and it actually shows you what your title page should look like, what the first page should look like. I even tell you start your paragraph with an attention-grabbing statement. Then I tell you where to put your thesis, tell you where to put your preview. So all of this information is already available to you, and it's there to be helpful. This is an example of the reference page where you have the authors listed in alphabetical order with hanging indents, and you see in this book, the book title is italicized. In this article, the newspaper is what's italicized. So I'm kind of trying to show you the different types of APA style citations. And there's even examples of differences between direct quotes and paraphrases, and some examples of a book citation, a journal article citation, and an electronic source citation. So you're kind of learning some of the differences in that. So be sure to access the Useful Comm Documents folder. It's there for you to be helpful for you. So in part 2 of today's video, we talked about changing word settings and citing in APA style. I hope it was helpful to see some of this stuff so that you know what I'm looking for and you know what I'm grading, how I'm docking points if you're not reaching this level of citing and formatting. So email me if you have questions. Otherwise, good luck in preparing effective APA style papers for the rest of this class and all future classes and all future documents for the rest of your life. All right, bye guys.